And now I got it working. We're good. All right. So we'll go and share my screen. Okay, so this is just going over some like the best practices for security around whenever you're using iPass, as well as just kind of like some things. And like as we go through, like I'll make some recommendations for certain things as well, alongside of like what the PowerPoint recommends. And then also, I like to keep these meetings really casual. If you guys have any questions at any point, feel free just to interrupt me. I'll also have the chat open, so if you want to put it in the chat as well, you're more than welcome to do that. But like I said, I like keeping these meetings usually really casual, really fun. So as you have questions, feel free to just say something to me. So we'll go ahead and get this party started. So iPass has essentially, whenever you're building within iPass, you have applications within iPass. Now you build these applications individually. So this is just an example of like what you might have. So like you might have a human resources application, an info technology application, facilities management, and student affairs application. This is just like a very high level overview. And it doesn't quite look like this. It's more of like a list view whenever you get in there. Now within each application, you have the ability to have credentials, flows, and then you can have users associated within each application. Now, these are all dedicated to that individual application. So I could have users in just that human resources one, but not student affairs, not facilities management, and all the other ones. I could have that same user in the human resources and student affairs, so on and so forth. Now, flows, those are only, flows and credentials can live only in that specific application. However, credentials, I can have a global level shared credential that any application can access as well.
I have a question already.
Go for it.
So as you may or may not be aware, in the ticketing side of it, we can't, so when we build a workflow, we can't copy it from one application to another. Is that the same with this as well? Or can we copy a flow from one application to another?
Oh, you can easily copy a flow from one app to another.
Thank you. Okay.
Like incredibly easily. So awesome. So going on now, so this kind of gets into like more like the permissioning and groups and how that works in iPass. And we'll jump in there like just to show like a brief example of like what these are like whenever you see them. So you have different, so you can create different types of permissions and groups within iPass. So you'll hear, so on just like a user perspective, I can actually set up a user where they can create flows, but also they can use application credentials, but they can't create them. So essentially, I can get granular on each level of within iPass to say, hey, this person can only see see like connectors. They can view them, but they can't add them or modify them in any way. So on each level of where people can access the system, you actually have the ability to say they can view them, they have full access, they deny them, or you can deny them access to it, or anything like that. There is a lot of granularity within the system. Now, that's only for like your system users. You can have that granularity for them. You can also have like another example is like your application admins. So these are the people that you could give some more permissions to. Now, these are just primarily examples for stuff of like what you can do. But like I said, every little piece of iPass is like where you can access stuff. You can set like that view, add, edit, modify, or just explicitly deny access to in everything. You can get very advanced with that security. But then further on from that, you could have something like system admins. Now, I believe that's how you all were set up within iPass already. Now, the cool thing about being a system admin is you have access over everything. So I can go into any specific application. I can view everything. I can pretty much do anything in the system. But you could also create a system admin where they can view applications, but not be able to create new ones as well. You can have that level of granularity within the system, which is really, really cool in my opinion.
We were playing around with it when we were watching the videos, and we did notice we didn't have the ability to create user groups. It's almost like our security level was somewhat adjusted.
Interesting. Well, we'll make sure before this meeting ends, we go and take a look at that.
Cool.
Yeah. So this right here is more or less an example of like how you can have different applications set up. Now, one of the misconceptions as I start going through this is like that these are going to be parent applications, and then we can have like children applications feeding into these things. So for example, here it just shows like the HR benefits, HR hiring, payroll, and safety. And then if I click through the rest of these, it goes through all those different options. So from this, it looks like that these are all going to be kind of like paired like applications to a sense. So actually how it's set up is, think of it as kind of like we could have a generalized shared human resources app, but then these are like sub applications. They have no connection to this human resources shared application. But let's say you wanted to have like an HR payroll application. You're only going to want to have a few select people in that payroll application, the ones who are going to be verified to see that level of information, or even like the IT network application. You're only going to want to have a few people set up into that. But then you could have another application that is information technology that could be shared among everybody among these three applications. But it just kind of allows you to have granularity, say like, hey, like this application is going to be everything related to the IT network, or like IT networking, so on and so forth. And then once again, like these applications right here, they have their own users, credentials, so on and so forth, and flows. Now, there's a really cool concept in iPaaS, and what it is called is managed applications. Now, if you're familiar with using like GitHub or GitLab, essentially what it is, it kind of works like a commit to a master branch, or kind of like a pull request, or not a pull request, kind of like a merge to a master branch in GitHub. So whenever you're going through this, you could have like one thing like IT network dev. So this is its own application itself that has its flows, credentials, and users. Then what you could have is an IT network prod application. Now this one, you might have a few select users, only like 2 or 3 users that actually have full access to this. But then you also have your IT network dev, which a lot of people have access to, which is kind of like your sandbox, your play environment. Now, one thing that I can do is I can actually set up a link between these two applications. So then whenever I build stuff in this managed applications, or in this dev application, I can simply do what's referred to as a refresh from reference to this network prod application. So whenever I do that, it'll let me know saying, hey, you have like flows A, B, and C have changed. And then like flows D, E, and F are all brand new. And then I can actually say, hey, bring these specific flows over. And then as I'm clicking through the menus, it'll realize, hey, like there's credentials associated with these flows. Do you want me to bring these over as well? Oh, wait, you have a dynamic form associated with this flow. It'll bring that over as well. It'll give you those options associated with it. But essentially, it allows you to know whenever things have changed in the sandbox app, and then easily bring it over to that production level application. Now, one thing that's also really cool is you can actually nest these really deeply as well. So you could have an IT network dev environment, and then your test environment, and then a production level environment. So you can actually nest these different applications really, really in depth based on how your practice is for your organization. And then this is just another example of how you can have a bunch of those different managed applications. Now, these are all like in iPaaS, they're all their own individual applications. Whenever you go to set up these new apps, you set them up in such a way that they will they'll be nested like that. So, any questions? Like I said, super simple, super simple.
That's cool. Totally get it.
Yeah. Any questions from anybody? Thoughts, concerns?
Is there any kind of reporting that, because the users and the access is controlled within the individual applications, where you have a global overview or can quickly tell who has access to what?
That's a really good question. And the easiest way to, I would say, manage things like that is through user groups, but there is no direct reporting to say, hey, these users have access to these applications.
Yeah.
I will write that down though, because it's actually a really good point, especially as like more and more people become into one of these into this tool, to have that high level of oversight around who has access to what.
Yeah, and when watching the videos, I know that I was talking to my colleague about how it seems like we'd want to stick to groups for that reason. So then that way it doesn't get wild west. We can quickly tell based on the group they're assigned to what level of access they have, and be very careful about that architecture so that we don't have people that have more access than we think that they do.
Yeah,
Something we've learned through the implementation of ITSM.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I mean, just another practice with security is just being able to have what am I trying to think of? Don't give it a lot of security at first, and then as they need it, slowly give more. So, but so here I'm already in your iPaaS environment. So I remember you mentioned that you guys didn't have access to create the user group. So let me go into here. I think they might have created a user group for you all. So they created a system administrators limited, which is what it looks like you all have access to right now. Let me see who has access to system administrators, which is just me. So
That's why then. Okay.
Yeah. So what I can do actually is see everybody's in this one. I think I might be able just to transfer you all to this one really easily.
Yeah, we figured you just didn't want us to play too hard yet, but we were like,
oh,
hey,
I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't.
We couldn't add any connector definitions, or yeah, it was pretty limited.
Yeah, so that, I mean, but that's an example of like what that level of security can be. So it's like you're still that system administrator, but where we can limit to say, hey, you can't do these certain things.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that. I like the managed application feature too. I mean, obviously maintenance is a concern, so we probably wouldn't want to do it with too many applications, but there might be some that makes sense to do.
It looks like I'll kind of go through each one of the add user to group system administrators. Move. Save changes. There we go. It was something was getting a little messed up in there. Let's gonna do this individually. Yeah. So now, did you all have any initial questions after going through the videos?
Well, on this function you're doing in itself right now, something's coming to mind. So like, what if, because we're saying we want to stick with groups so that we're really clear on what access people have, is there a way that we can build an administrator role that would prevent the addition of individual roles and they'd always only have to assign user groups? Or is it not that granular?
That I do not know the answer to, like if that is a capability of doing that. That is definitely something that we can look into though. I think it might be like you could do it with both, but I mean, maybe you only give a few select people the ability just to even do what I'm doing right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's probably the way I would set it up, is just give the few select people just even the ability to modify these kinds of things.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's our practice with ITSM right now.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So yeah, because I mean, you all might only have like a few people at this level right here, and then you'll make those more granular things. But like if we go into the not user settings, into the user groups, if we look at this administrators limited, we can see that through this we have all these different, and I'll zoom in on this a little bit just so we can see it. So here we have like application design. These are all the things that you all have access to, but then I can also edit these associated roles so I can see like, okay, like application design you had full access to, but you were saying like user groups you didn't have full access to. Well, we can come through and easily modify that through this menu. And like I said, you have like the view only, view edit, view delete, view edit, delete, full, and then explicitly deny for each one of these individual pieces itself. So for, I think maybe your situation, so it looks like for what you were asking earlier, I don't think you can get that like that granular saying like these people can add, yeah. It's just like you can like this is like editing permission, and then this is editing permissioning on that user. There's like I would have thought that I would have put it somewhere right in here for it.
I do like though that they have the custom role management setting, because that means at least they can't go in and modify a group after they've added them to it, correct? Is that how?
That is, yeah, that is correct. You also can't edit permissions. You actually can't even view permissions for the permissions that you don't have. So like for me, I'm at like a sysadmin level, but I'm not like full sysadmin level, like there's a lot more functionality that I don't even have. I can look at somebody else's profile and see the settings that I have that they also share. But if I go to somebody else who I know has more access than I do in that users page, I actually can't even view their permissions.
Cool. So you don't get teased.
Yeah, exactly. Because if I did, I would keep asking for more. But yeah, you can see like custom roles in this case was the view only and stuff like that, like where you can see like security configuration was view only and so on and so forth. So then I can come here modified, so I can say like full and then save changes really easily and then save those. So yeah. And then so like I said, so whenever you're in this page view, like so I'm a full system admin in this, but I can go to all applications and I can see these are the applications that have already been set up or that you all have already set up. And then did you set up one of the managed flows or one of the managed applications?
We haven't set anything up in iPass yet. Is that what you're
Okay.
asking? No.
I was just curious because you said you like the concept of the shared application or no, the managed applications.
Just based on your slides.
Oh, okay, yeah. So to kind of show off what I mean, like by the what managed applications are, is I'm going to go into one of our demo environments to make life a little bit easier. So this is under the. Okay, so I got this app, and then I need the IT network dev. Okay, so this would be kind of like what the base application is right here. So this is like your IT network dev application. So we have all of our flows, forms, and credentials associated with just this application, and I can assign users to also be a part of this application. Now, let's say I came in here, built a bunch of flows, and everything is only related to the sandbox environments. But I have my connectors that are all also related to production environments. And rather than like having to copy and paste everything over one by one, what I can simply do is if I go back into that prod application, I have this refresh and reference right here. So we can see like if I were to go ahead and just get rid of these things right here. If I were to do a refresh from reference, what it's doing is it's going back through that other application and it says like, hey, like these are some flows in that application. The status of it is new. Now you'll also see statuses like managed was updated or the base application was updated, I think is what it's called, or reference was updated or I forget like what the terminology is, but it'll let you know saying like, was the live version updated or was the base version updated? But here then I can come through, I can click on next, and then this is now their credentials. So it's like, what credentials do I want to bring over associated with stuff? I can go ahead and click next on here. And then what's really cool is we have the connector level of being able to like swap out what connectors are being used. So in iPass, it's usually best practice to do like for like TDX connectors to have like your sandbox connector and then your production level connector. That's why you see TDX reports dash sandbox. But I can come in here and click on here and you'll see where we have where it'll say like, hey, like these are the resources you can substitute with. So I can click on the TDX reports production. And then like whenever I do like the TDX sandbox, I can look through and then there's a bunch of sandbox ones or there's a bunch of these other TDX ticket ones, but I can click on my production level one, click next. It'll give me just a quick summary view of everything that's going to happen. And then I can go ahead and just click on update and then we're good to go. And then now everything is in here. It's super, super easy to do. And then I can come through here and then like all those connectors are swapped out. So even though it still says sandbox right here, we can come back in here and see that this is now using that production level connector, which would be accessing my live environments.
So then would you go in and update the name so you don't get confused?
Yeah. Usually what I do just out of my practice is like, you can actually rename like what this connector actually says. So I would call this one like get all tickets because that's what the action was doing. Like I would actually come in here and rename this so then I know what that specific action is doing. And then I'll use the icon to know, oh, that's a TDX connector or something like that. So that's usually what my best practice is. So then I don't run into that kind of an issue.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So Any other questions?
The permissions you mentioned as you were pushing it forward from reference, and you mentioned carrying the permissions over. What did
Mhm.
that mean?
So that I misspoke. I meant carrying the credentials over. So I have credentials in this application. It means that the credentials were brought over as
Got it.
well.
Okay.
So then I easily could, and once that, like, I also have credentials in this environment, I can say, hey, this credential references this other one in the environment. So like I could do this one to be the prod level one. And the next time I do that refresh and reference, it'll say, hey, like anytime that sandbox credential is used, actually replace it with that prod level credential. Like kind of like how I did the connector resource substitution, you'll have that same capability with the credential as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So, yeah. As you all are kind of getting started with things, since we have a couple more minutes, kind of want to just point you out to a few things. One of the biggest things is this libraries right here. So you'll have a global community library. And within this actually has already a bunch of flows that are already like readily available for you. So like you have like Active Directory disable user accounts based on, I think this is doing it based off of a schedule, and then you also have another one that's like trigger based. You also have what are referred to as like snippets, so kind of like just like small little blocks of like iPath steps to be easily able to use. You also have